Hey everyone, it's Denise Brown from the Caregiving Years Training Academy. Thank you so much for watching this overview of the Caregiving Department, an in-house solution for all your employees who care. I'm going to give you a general overview. If this program is of interest to you, I'm going to invite you at the end to schedule time to talk with me about how we can personalize this program for your workplace, or if you're interested in partnering on this idea, I'd love to connect with you as well. Okay, so let's start with the presentation. And I want to mention that I have been thinking about this idea for a year and a half. So the first time I thought about this was January of 2020. And then we know what happened 2 months later. But I've never let go of the idea that this is really something that the workplace needs. And now more than ever, there really is so much evidence from research around today's workplace that shows we need something in-house to support employees who care. So I'm just curious, what do you think is the answer to this question? What's the percentage of employees in the workplace who are family caregivers? So I'm going to give you my answer, and you might think, oh no, that's not right, but I'll tell you why in just a minute. So I believe it's 100%. I believe anyone in the workplace could be considered a family caregiver. And here's why. Here's how I define a family caregiver. It's anyone who worries about the well-being of a family member or friend. And then I expand the definition to really reflect the intensity of a caregiving experience, because it does intensify over time. I had created a concept that stages the caregiving experience in 1997. That was the first iteration. And at that time, it was 4 stages. Over the past 20 plus years, I've really enhanced and tweaked those different stages of the caregiving experience. And the reality is, we are all family caregivers. In addition, we tend to opt out of a definition that talks about the tasks of caregiving. Caregiving is an emotional experience, and the primary emotion is worry. So this has happened more times than I can actually tell you, but I'll tell you about the most recent time. Was just a couple weeks ago. I co-facilitate a grieving support group. We had a new member, and she talked about her brother's death. And he had died 2 years previously, and she was still struggling. And it wasn't that she struggled to talk about how much she missed him, because she was very clear about how much she loved and missed him. But she struggled around this idea that she was his caregiver. It was very interesting to watch this, because she was trying to say, you know what, I'm not sure if I should be called a caregiver, and I'm not sure if I have a reason to miss caring for him. And so I asked her, how much did you worry about your brother? And she said, oh my gosh, I worried about him constantly. Every decision I made was based on the impact on his well-being. Where she lived, where she worked, all were taken into consideration because of her brother's needs. So if you look at the traditional definitions of family caregivers, it's about tasks. And that is not what the experience is. It's an emotional experience of worrying, where we use our leadership skills to create strategies, plans, prepare, decide, manage. We also do tasks, but the defining part of a caregiving experience is worrying. So here's the simple definition. Anyone who worries about the well-being of a family member or a friend is a family caregiver. So if you think about it, in the workplace, we all are worried about someone who we know, whether it be within our family or within our circle of friends. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about my background supporting employees in the workplace, but I'll tell you about a young man that I interacted with. Oh my gosh, this was probably 10 years ago, if not longer. He was at one of my presentations. He was sitting in the front row. He was very engaged in the content around stress. And as a young man, I thought it was fascinating that he was at this presentation. And as I started talking about resources that were available in the workplace for employees like him, he raised his hand and said, you know what, I had a terrible time getting to work on time. And so I asked him a little bit about it. And so you would think, oh my gosh, he was out partying all night. That's why he was late to work. He was late to work because he could not fall asleep because he was so worried about members of his family. And he connected with a counselor who gave him some suggestions around how to manage the worry. He's a family caregiver. So when we broaden the definition, we really look at all employees as having a worry about someone they know. And that means everybody needs support around the worries because it impacts the workplace. He almost got fired because he could not get to work on time because he was so tired, because he could not fall asleep, because he was so worried. Okay. So I told you a story about a young man, but I'm going to tell you about women in the workforce because women are the ones who are doing the work around taking care of each other in the workforce. So we take care of our families. We also take care of our colleagues in the workforce. And there was a great report released in September. Women in the workplace. That was fascinating. And it really spoke to women leaders in the workplace and what they are doing to support their colleagues. So they are the ones that help their team members with work-life challenges, with making sure that workloads are manageable and checking in to ensure everyone is okay. Women do this more than men. In addition, they are the driving force behind employee resource groups. They make it happen. And they are all about making sure that the employee resource group has diversity in terms of its attendees. That's what women do. Women invite, and then they take care of this team. And so you could say that women look at the team as being everyone in the workplace. But there's a price that women pay. They are burnt out. More than half of female team leaders are burnt out. And it makes sense because not only are they managing their workload, but they're taking care of their team. As a result, women are really rethinking their career. And think about this, 33%, 1 in 3, say they have considered a change in their career. 25% said that just a few months into the pandemic. 40% of women are considering leaving the current company they work for or switching jobs. We all know about the Great Resignation. This stat would indicate that women are doing it. They're thinking about it, and many are doing it. Okay, so that's the insight into what's happening in the workplace. Women are taking care of the workplace. Here's how the workplace looks when you look at managers. So I used to do an annual survey of those who work and those who care for a family member, so family caregivers. When I asked who did you speak to about your caregiving situation, overwhelmingly, they spoke to their managers. They spoke to their managers first. They might speak to some colleagues, and down the ladder was HR. So rarely did they go to HR, but they regularly went to their managers. And it makes sense, right? Because they're going to their managers to ask for time off, leaving early, paid leave, unpaid leave. They're looking for some help around managing the two responsibilities. So the manager holds the key to the flexibility that they need. Okay. So managers are where family caregivers are looking to for support. And it's the relationship with the manager that really drives employees' job satisfaction. So I own a small business, but for many years in owning this small business, I worked other jobs. And I worked for a large media company, which has since dissolved, that was here in the Chicago area. And we had family caregiving situations in my small department of 15. One cared for her father, one cared for his spouse. Actually, we had 3. I'm always so amazed when I really start to drill down into the details of employees and my coworkers and people I know, because I think, oh my gosh, of course that was a caregiving experience. Okay, so there were 4. Actually, now that I think about it, in my, oh no, there were 5 in my department of 15. The leader, our senior vice president, she cared for her father. My boss, the vice president, has a son who has a chronic illness. And then I had a coworker who cared for her father. And then I had another kind of like a manager to me who cared for his wife. And again, we had a department of 15. So 30% were in a caregiving experience. What was fascinating to me was who was able to receive accommodations much easier than others. And it really depended on your level, so how high up you were and who your manager was. So I saw colleagues that got a lot of flexibility. They were able to leave early, come in late. And then I saw colleagues who just had a grin and bear it and didn't get that kind of accommodation. It depends on your manager. So if you think about how well you're managing caregiving in your career responsibilities, it depends many ways on your manager. Not to say that we don't have responsibilities as the employee. Absolutely, we have employees, but there is a factor, and that's the manager. Okay, so in this survey that was done by McKinsey, which also is the one who had done the Women in the Workforce survey, they found that 75% of survey participants said the most stressful aspect of their job was their immediate boss, right? And it makes sense. Makes sense. When you have a workplace that you feel supports you, responds to you, takes care of you, it does increase the business's effectiveness. So I think this is interesting. So it's a call center. Workers had more support in the workplace, and that actually increased the sales. Isn't that interesting? It makes sense, right? Obviously, this is not something that is like rocket science. It totally makes sense, but we always look to what's the return on investment? If we are investing in our employees' well-being, how does that impact the business? It impacts the business. When you have workforce that feels supported and understood and really important, and when they are engaged, their work is better. So here's what's so interesting about family caregivers in the workplace. We look to traditional benefits like an employee assistance program. We know that family caregivers want flexibility. So the Rosalind Carter Institute for Caregiving released a study in September. So September was a big month with research around working family caregivers. And so they learned that, if flexibility is offered, family caregivers are going to take it, and it makes sense. So as someone who has helped my parents since 2004, I have done work at 3 a.m. in the emergency room, at 10 p.m. in a hospital room. We can work anywhere if we have that flexibility. But here's what's interesting, and this is not a surprise too. So if you have followed a traditional employee benefit, like an employee assistance program, utilization is typically very low. So an employee assistance program offers counseling, and it could be free counseling sessions on an annual basis. So it might be anywhere from 3 to 6 free counseling sessions per issue. So for instance, you could get receive counseling for divorce and for caregiving. And those would be separate issues, and you could receive up to however many counseling sessions that are free for each issue. So if it's 3 free sessions per issue and you have 2 issues, divorce and caregiving, you could receive 6 free sessions per year. In addition, typically an employee assistance program offers information and referral. So if I worked for a company that offered an EAP and I needed help with my mom trying to figure out how to keep her safe, I could call and ask for referrals. You are calling a third-party provider. So the employee assistance program typically is delivered through a provider. And then that provider has a call center. So you're calling a call center and then you're directed to perhaps someone who could help, or whoever you connect with at the call center might do the initial research for you. Industry-wide, utilization for an employee assistance program is probably less than 10%. An employer, though, is paying a per employee fee every month for this program. So it could be a couple bucks, $1.50 per employee per month for the service, and yet less than 10% of employees are actually using it. And Rosalind Carter's research shows this, that in this particular study, only about a third of firms offered the benefit. And then of those firms, less than half of workers who had access actually used it. So here's a quote from the Women in the Workplace study, which I think is really this great call to action for all of us, that we need bold steps. We really need to think about what's the culture of the workplace that supports employees, especially because employees care everywhere. They care at home and they care at work. So I wanted to just give you an overview of my particular experience. So I started working with family caregivers in 1990, and then I came up with the concept to stage the experience in 1997. I have a book that's in its 9th edition that was released in the summer of 2021 that gives the most up-to-date reflections on the stages. I started helping my parents after my father's bladder cancer diagnosis in 2004. I have been working throughout my caregiving experience, not only for myself, but for employers. So I also brought my caregiving experience to the workplace. I did not talk about it a lot, especially at that media company. I was very closed about it. Although interestingly enough, as someone that was in the space, I watched how it played out in the workplace. In addition, I was part of a speakers bureau for just about 20 years. And that speakers bureau provided presenters to employee benefit programs, including EAPs and work-life benefit companies. And then I went into the employer space, repping that EAP to provide lunch and learn workshops. So I delivered workshops on caregiving, stress, work-life balance. In addition, I would also participate in benefit fairs, repping the EAP. So I would be in the room with the vendors trying to get employees to use their employee assistance program. It was hard. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So here's what I learned in being in the workplace as a rep for a EAP. And I think about this when I delivered a presentation at a call center for a telecommunications firm. And I went to this firm on a regular basis over a period of years. And they often changed policy and procedures. And one of the last times I was there, the employees were very stressed out about a new policy, which meant that after every call with a customer, that particular call center rep was surveyed. And depending on how the customer surveyed that rep was going to have a great day or a bad day. And from the call center rep's perspective, they could not control a lot of what happened when that customer completed the survey. So for instance, if a customer didn't get what they wanted because it wasn't theirs to get, that customer would take it out on the survey of the rep, even though the rep was doing his or her job. It was extremely stressful. When I was delivering the workshop, they were talking about this, and I had to ask them to explain what they meant because I wasn't sure what they were talking about. So they were very kind and explained what they meant. But I thought, you know what? I am going into all these different workplaces without an understanding of how their business works. What are their procedures? What are their policies? What are the expectations? What are the busy seasons? I mean, I would do research about the companies before I got there, but there was no way I could know about this new survey that they had introduced. In addition, when you understand the inner workings of the business, you have a better idea of how that impacts someone's family life, their caregiving experience. So if, for instance, a call center rep had a terrible day because they got all kinds of bad reviews and it was beyond their control, you can imagine what it's like to go home then and provide care to a family, especially when there's a family member that has chronic care needs. Talk about stress. Talk about not getting a break. Talk about dreading the next day. Okay, so it's important that an employee connects to a resource that understands its business and its job and its responsibilities and understands that personal caregiving experience. On a regular basis, family caregivers will say that unless you've been there, you cannot understand it. It's so important. As family caregivers, we speak a very different language than others who might not have that experience. When you are worried about the other shoe dropping, it is a constant reminder that you can't necessarily completely relax. Okay, so here's the bottom line. We need a solution that recognizes and compensates those who care. Women are doing the work already. We're doing the work in our family. We're doing the work in the workplace. And that's why I believe that a caregiving department, which is an in-house solution, is the solution we need. Now more than ever, we need an in-house solution. If you have employees that are already doing this, recognize them, promote them, tap them to launch an innovative solution like a caregiving department, where they are the hub, where employees go when they need support, help, ideas. If you want to retain that talent who's already thinking about leaving, add something innovative that meets their needs, that they can't get somewhere else. In addition, we know the cost of replacing employees is high. If you have an engaged workforce who has been a part of your workforce for a long time, you have an effective, well-oiled machine. You have the historical perspective of why things happen the way they do. That's so important. There's that wisdom of longevity that is invaluable. In addition, people wouldn't call the employee resource program for help, the employee assistance program, because they were so concerned about confidentiality. They would say, Denise, who's going to tell my manager why I called and when I called? And I would assure them, this is completely confidential. It's not going anywhere. But they didn't know that. They couldn't see that. In addition, they couldn't see who they were talking to. They didn't trust that they were going to be connected to someone who understood and someone that could truly help them. So this visible caregiving department that does ensure confidentiality with one-on-one consulting sessions and referrals shows the employee what they're going to get. And if you have this caregiving department, you have an opportunity for top leadership to use it and then share their experiences of what it was like. You normalize the caregiving experience, you normalize the use of support for that caregiving experience through your caregiving department. In addition, because the caregiving department includes employees of the same company, they understand the busy season. They understand the work processes. So when an employee comes in to talk to someone in the caregiving department and says, I'm having a terrible day because all of my reviews are awful, they understand immediately what that employee is talking about. And when you're having a terrible day, the last thing you want to do is explain why. You just want to connect to someone who says, oh gosh, that is frustrating. Let's sit and talk. Let's figure out what you need. In addition, support and providers available to help in a caregiving experience are changing left and right. So I actually first started thinking of the very spark of this idea a couple of years ago. I was talking to an employee benefit, which is basically a database of providers. So employees could go into the database and search for a home care agency, for instance, in their local area, and then they would receive referrals. Well, the truth is a referral to local home care agencies isn't worth anything. It is so tough to navigate to find the home care agency that does have good staff, that does provide effective training, that is reliable. You need someone like the staff in the caregiving department that keeps its pulse on what's happening locally and then connects to a national network of our certified caregiving consultants who understands as well. So our certified caregiving consultants have gone through my training, in essence, to become life coaches to family caregivers. So they help with decisions, strategies, plans, stress management, well-being. They also help with the juggle, caregiving and career, plus everything else that's a part of our life. I went through life coach training in 2004, and I take this communication strategy I learned and teach it in this training program. In addition, I teach what the caregiving experience is like, from when you first start to worry it could happen all the way through after caregiving ends. And because of this, the consultants know how to recommend a resource at the right time. In addition, we talk about grieving. We talk about how hard it can be to accept help during a caregiving experience, which is why we need exceptional understanding. We also talk about resilience. And then the consultants learn planning programs, and I'll tell you about that in just a minute. So the staff of the caregiving department actually goes through the certified caregiving consultant training. In addition, they can go through our facilitator training to run support groups in the workplace. They could, for instance, have support groups for a particular level of staff, and then a support group for managers, so that those who report to a manager don't have to worry about being in a support group with his or her manager. And then the managers can speak honestly about what it's like to manage through a pandemic and manage their own caregiving experience and take care of a team. A caregiving experience is local, which is why you want a staff that understands what's happening locally to provide resources. So just today, I was talking to a colleague who I haven't talked to in a couple of years. She had a job change, and we were talking about in the Chicagoland area, how often there are changes within employment in home care agencies and in nursing home facilities and assisted living facilities. It is so hard to keep up with who works where and who's the good provider, but the staff can keep up to date on that because employees are going to go back to them and say, I used this home care agency and it was great. I used this one, not so great. So you have this up-to-date, timely hub of resources that can help. It's an expertise, not only in the caregiving experience, but in available resources. And it's local to your workplace, but because you have a network of certified caregiving consultants, it's also local to where they are. Okay, so here is, I think, really, truly the beauty of a caregiving department. It is a policy that a workplace could create where every employee creates a family emergency plan annually or twice a year. And they work with a consultant because our consultants are taught how to lead family emergency planning sessions. They have a planning tool which they can give to employees, for instance. And then they can meet with teams. So the team has a plan. If there's an employee who has to step away because of a crisis, how does that team continue? They have a plan in place. It is so effective when you think through what could happen and then put plans in place to ensure that everything will be okay if it happens. So an employee meets individually, confidentially, with a consultant, and then a team talks out concerns, the what ifs with a consultant. But here's the real beauty of doing family emergency planning sessions. The caregiving department understands the needs of the employees and then can deliver programs and services that meet those needs. So for instance, if you have a large population of the workforce that is caring for a parent and a special needs child, you can create programming to support them. You could create employee resource groups. You can create support groups. You have this insight into what the workforce needs and can deliver it. In addition, you also have a greater understanding of how the caregiving experience is impacting your workplace so that you can put plans in place to manage that impact. In addition, the caregiving department can support employee resource groups, support managers. We have training to help managers have difficult conversations with employees. That could be training that the caregiving department provides to the managers, and then provide that extra support if a manager's like, I'm just not sure what to do. Well, just send them down the hallway. We'll take care of him or her. That's what the caregiving department can say. Because you have an insight into what employees are going through because of their emergency planning session, you can also make sure that the employee has the right help at the right time. Let's say I do a family emergency planning session with a consultant in the caregiving department for the employer I work for. I've shared that I care for both parents. I share how old they are, what their conditions are, and then how I manage their care. Let's say on a Monday morning, I call into my manager and say, you know what, my mom fell last night. I have to take paid time off today. The manager will say, fingers crossed, okay. And then my next call is to the caregiving department and I'll say, I need to follow up. My mom fell last night. I'm wondering what resources I can tap into so that I can get to work tomorrow. Amazing. And then I tap into resources and I'm at work on Tuesday. In addition, grief is a part of our life. And I really think of a compassionate return to work program for employees who are grieving. So in my particular situation, I help my parents who are 90 and 87. My mom had a heart attack in July. We were expecting more to come. And then 3 weeks after my mom's heart attack, my brother suddenly died. And then my mom was diagnosed with Parkinson's. All that grief is something I carry and I bring it everywhere with me, including to this presentation, right? You cannot keep it away because it's just part of you. So we show up to work in these grieving states, doing our best, and yet we need more. What if there was this compassionate return to work program where every lunch hour you could connect to a support group for others who are grieving and you could just grieve for an hour and then you get back to work and you feel like, okay, I took care of those grieving emotions. I'm okay to get back to work. The last annual survey I did of working family caregivers was fascinating to me because the survey included a question about how do you manage your stress? The reality is employees are bringing tools to work to manage their stress, essential oils, music, meditations. They are doing things in the workplace to manage these difficult emotions. And it's not so much, it's stress and it's also grief, because in a caregiving experience, you're watching these declines, you're grieving for so much. They are going to the bathroom to cry. Some of them use the meditation room, but not to meditate, to cry. It is already happening in the workplace. Why not create a separate, safe place, like a support group, where employees can let it out, release the difficult emotions they're already feeling, so they can feel more productive at work. We feel guilty when we're not productive. That's the reality. We feel guilty if we're not contributing to the team. And if there's support in place where we can take care of the difficult emotions of our life, we can feel much more productive and engaged and feel good about being on our team. It's what we want. It's what we want. You can also think about, for instance, a caregiving department having an easier program to help an employee who took a leave, who comes back to work. So let's say my mom fell, she broke her hip, she has to have surgery, and then we're looking for a rehab placement. And I think, well, I need to stay with my dad while I'm trying to manage my mom. So I'm going to take 3 weeks off. And what if there was a program that helped me when I come back after 3 weeks that says, okay, tell us what happened while you were gone. I let it all out to the caregiving staff, and then I go to my team and say, I'm ready to work. Okay, here's the beauty, fingers crossed, of the caregiving department. I've crunched the numbers. It is possible to have a department that pays for itself, meaning that every employee might get free consultations to create their family emergency plan. So depending on how a company sets it up, it could be once a year or twice a year. And then the employee could schedule additional consulting sessions to talk out caregiving for a reduced fee. And then that's how the department generates revenue to pay for the staff salaries. In addition, that staff in the caregiving department becomes this amazing resource for managers, because managers can say, okay, I'm going to have a difficult conversation with you, employee, and then I'm going to take you down to the caregiving department and introduce you to a consultant who can provide more support than I can. In addition, if you have a caregiving department that recognizes and rewards your talent and promotes them to launch this innovative solution, you have an incredible competitive edge. It's going to be so much easier for you to recruit talent because you are doing something that is needed, that already happens in the workplace, and you are showing we see it and we want to honor and recognize and reward this. Okay, so I just wanted to give you just a little bit of insight into the work that I do. So I do regular workshops and events and planning sessions. So when we do these events, we ask for attendees to give us feedback, and 96% of those who have attended events and planning sessions are strong advocates of our programs. 100% who have attended our family emergency planning sessions are strong advocates of our program. We have programs that speak to the caregiving experience that family caregivers see as valuable. And that's what we bring to that caregiving department. So think about partnering with us. You could partner with us for a 3-month pilot. So as an employer, you could think about doing this just to see the value. You could commit to doing it for 3 months. We help you create the department. We help you train your staff. We provide you with the planning tools. We provide ongoing support, and then we provide the research. So we do a pre and post survey to determine the effectiveness. And then we look to see what's been the impact in your workplace. So if you're interested in the caregiving department, our pilot program, or just being a partner with us to take this idea further into reality, please feel free to reach out to me. So here's my website. It's careyearsacademy.com, and there's my email address. And I want to mention too that I started working with family caregivers in 1990, and I was one of the first to launch an online caregiving community for family caregivers in 1996. And when I did it, I had very few people that said, "Oh my gosh, that's awesome." I had a lot of people who said, "Why are you doing that? You're never going to reach family caregivers." And the reality is, when I launched that online caregiving community, I immediately was reaching family caregivers because I spoke their language. I provided what they needed. I was very involved in running the community, ensuring they had the support. I sat in chat rooms every day. We had chat rooms 3 times a day, but I sat in one every day. I ran listservs where I read every message. So I was actively engaged in conversations with family caregivers the entire time I managed that online community for 24 years. I sold it in March of 2020 to focus on the training and development programs. But I have been the first to market in a lot of different ways. And this is the one that I feel like, wow, this is the game changer. So please join me. Be first to market with this with me. We can really do great things and make a huge difference in the workplace and really drive innovation in a way that makes a meaningful impact. Okay, thank you so much for watching. I so look forward to connecting with you. Feel free to reach out and we'll schedule a time that's convenient for you to continue the conversation. Okay, thanks so much. Bye-bye.